Trump just announced that the war in Iran is over. Again, let's hear from Tim Pool.
The war in Iran is over. Again. I guess.
Yes, again.
But probably not. It's probably part of a bigger picture.
Spoiler, it's not. We'll get into that in a bit, but
of some sort.
Iran has just announced that the Strait of Hormuz is fully open and ready for full passage. Thank you. Again, this isn't exactly true. We'll get into that.
Whiplash, as I said the other day. Donald Trump has announced. Iran has just announced the Strait of Iran is fully open and ready for...
And by the way, it is not the Strait of Iran. It is the Strait of Hormuz.
Full passage. Thank you. I don't know what the Strait of Iran is. I don't know if Trump posted this. Joe Rogan was making fun of...
The Strait of Iran, that's like actually giving Iran ownership of the Strait of Hormuz.
I'm not making fun of it, but he was like, what are we doing? What's going on? I kind of think that's the intended condition. You're not supposed to know. Now, listen, my friends, I don't think the war is actually over. I think that when you look at the bigger picture, as I've stated ad nauseum, there's something else going on, and this is just one component of it.
Yeah, there's more going on, and let's get into that. First, let's just check X about what's really going on with the Strait of Hormuz. So, on one positive side, the first cruise ship has made its way out of the Strait of Hormuz. So, they are opening it a little bit, and that's definitely new. Let the cruise ship escape. But breaking, dozens of ships are making U-turns in the Strait of Hormuz, heading back into the Persian Gulf after surging towards it following Arashi's completely open declaration, per maritime traffic. Again, Arashi, the guy who's talking on behalf of Iran, I don't think he completely coordinated with the RIGC. I think, or at least he's not, I have problems with how he's communicating because it's not completely open. Obviously, you see the ships turning back here. And here we have the Wall Street Journal reported that the Islamic Republic has informed intermediaries that even after the ceasefire brokered by the United States, restriction on ship traffic in the Strait of Hormuz will continue. So the Strait of Hormuz is not completely open. According to the report, in Tehran's proposed plan, only a limited number of commercial ships will be allowed to pass each day, and coordination of their passage must be done through the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The newspaper wrote that the Islamic Republic has introduced this mechanism as part of a maritime agreement following the agreement, but at the same time reserves the right to block ships it deems hostile. So basically, the straits aren't open. Continuing on, I just want to go into some of the crazy tweets Trump has done in the last 24 hours. Here's the first absolutely crazy tweet. Iran has agreed to never close the Strait of Hormuz again. It will no longer be used as a weapon against the world. President Donald Trump. So what is Trump smoking? Because it's obviously not true. Why would they give up their most powerful leverage? Next tweet. Now that the Hormuz Strait situation is over, it's not though, I received a call from NATO asking if we would need some help. I told them stay away unless they just want to load up their ships with oil. They were useless when needed, a paper tiger. So Trump is not happy with NATO, just European NATO. Next tweet. Iran, with the help of the USA, has removed or is removing all the sea mines. Thank you, President Donald J. Trump. On that note, here is what it actually looks like right now in the Gulf. Actual tracking right now. Notice this big area where there's no ships at all? Yeah, that's where the mines would be. And you saw the cruise ship sneaking by here, so there might be one path open there. But right here in the middle, I think there are mines. And that is actually the same route, the route the cruise ship took that the U.S. destroyer took the other day. So the route through the Strait of Hormuz is around hugging the Iranian coastline or a very narrow strip hugging the coast of Oman. Oh, here's the next really crazy one. U.S. will get all nuclear dust created by our great B-2 bombers. No money will exchange hands in any way, shape, or form. This deal is in no way subject to Lebanon either, but the U.S. will separately work with Lebanon and deal with Hezbollah's situation in an appropriate manner. Israel will not be bombing Lebanon any longer. They are prohibited from doing so by the U.S. Enough is enough. Well, so that is one positive step that he's actually saying, using words like Israel's prohibited from bombing Lebanon, except that I think they bombed them since he said this. It was only killing one person, but it was still a bomb. But the really crazy stuff is that U.S. will get all the Iran's nuclear material. That is what Trump is declaring. Iran hasn't agreed to that, by the way. And then this crazy one right here. The Strait of Hormuz is completely open and ready for business and full passage, but the naval blockade will remain in full force and effect as it pertains to Iran. Only until such a time as our transactions with Iran is 100% complete. This process should be over quickly, and that most points are already negotiated. Thank you for your attention to the matter. President Donald J. Trump. Okay, yeah, this is a crazy situation that he thinks he believes, that he can blockade Iran ships, but Iran will let all other ships through. No. We've found out since then that, yeah, if U.S. continues its blockade, the Strait of Hormuz remain closed. Iran rejected two of President Trump's central claims from the day's talks. Tehran denied ever agreeing to transfer its enriched uranium out of the country, and it said it will continue to restrict traffic through the Straits of Hormuz. So, Iran has a very different attitude, and given that this is how traffic through the Strait of Hormuz looks right now, don't notice no ships going through, the Straits of Hormuz are still closed.
There are two ways that the Strait of
should go back to the Oman ceasefire negotiations that were happening. Colonel, we do have a ceasefire in Lebanon. Probably temporary. It's only 10 days.
Well, even a temporary ceasefire is encouraging.
Are you?
It is.
We haven't spoken since the ceasefire at all between Iran and the US. Are you optimistic? I just spoke to Robert Pape, and he said, Mario, he thinks an invasion is imminent. Everything's pointing.
It is. For the last 2 days, I highlighted how more troops are being moved into the region, and bombs are being flown in as fast as possible. Huge quantity of bombs. Yeah. This ceasefire isn't holding.
Pointing in that direction. I was a bit surprised by it.
Well, I think on Monday, what will happen when the ceasefire ends, if not before, but I think it'll be Monday, you're going to see what I think Trump hopes will be the final solution for Iran. You'll see a massive air and missile attack. And that massive air and missile attack will last in terms of intensity for several days. This, he hopes, will break Iran effectively, break the state, break the economy, break the society. Now, when it comes to this business of invasion,
It's he can't accept anything less than like the defeat of Iran, like either their surrender or the government breaking up and collapsing. That's what he needs for political survival, and neither is likely or practically impossible.
I think it's absurd. Why are we using that word? If you don't have 1 million men under arms already stationed in the region.
Limited one of the islands. Sorry, he didn't mean a full invasion, just limited some of the islands. A limited ground operation.
I think that will be tried, unfortunately. Whether or not it succeeds depends entirely on how can they get in there. I mean, if you look at the current so-called blockade, the blockade is about 500 miles away from the Strait of Hormuz. So if you draw a line across the ocean from virtually the border between Iran and Pakistan over to the edge of Oman, that's about 500 miles out. That's where the blockade begins. Now, that is a demonstration of the effectiveness of the strike zone that Iran has created around its country.
Yep.
In other words, if you move ships beyond that 500-mile limit into the range of Iranian missile and unmanned system strikes, then you're likely to lose some of those ships, or they'll certainly be damaged and put out of action. So that is a demonstration, frankly, of the problem that confronts anybody who wants to bring ground troops into the Persian Gulf. How do you get them in there without being detected? How do you assemble them and pick them up and then move them over to these islands without being detected, targeted, and ultimately hit? Once you're on the island, how do you protect anybody that you put there from the various systems available to strike the islands?
Yeah.
And then ultimately, what difference does it make? What difference does it make if you can sit on that island with some infantrymen? What do you expect those poor soldiers or Marines to do? What are they going to do?
Try to control the Strait of Hormuz, at least have the capability to intercept drones and missiles if they target the ships. So offer some form of security.
That's a lot of equipment then. Are they going to bring in batteries of air defense, air and missile defense? You've got to transport that over water. That means you're going to have to lift it through the...
Basically, we're going to be attacking Iran. I get through some of the other videos I have. Also, here's another good indication that things aren't ending.
Look at the story
Okay.
from Reuters. Pentagon approaches automakers and manufacturers to boost weapon production. World War III. Trump cut off China in the Strait of Hormuz, and you've got Hegseth saying, or I'm sorry, it was
I love how Tim Pool is always. It was Civil War before for a few years. Now it's World War III. He always just goes the most extreme possible. He's warning World War III, Civil War. Eventually, if he says it for enough years, maybe one day it'll be true. But the important part here is, if we were heading for peace and everything was all kosher in the Middle East, Pentagon would not be approaching automakers, manufacturers to boost weapon production. That's just plain truth.
So this is such a unique situation. I wrote a piece last night, just said, because I thought, oh, thank God, they've actually got a ceasefire now between Hezbollah and Israel. So this thing actually, we may be on the verge of taking an extra.
I learned that the infrastructure needed for mass surveillance started being built before 9/11. Similar concept. Yes, yes. And same thing, a lot of things, like they started preparing for mail-in voting like 2 years before the election, like 6 months before COVID. They were preparing for mass mail-in ballots. Another example of good timing type deals. Yeah.
I wrote a piece last night, just said, because I thought, oh, thank God, they've actually got a ceasefire now between Hezbollah and Israel. So this thing actually, we may be on the verge of taking an exit ramp. This thing may be coming to a close.
Yeah.
And then I watched what Scott Bessent was saying, the Secretary of Treasury. He not only, 4 weeks ago, they lifted sanctions on Iran for oil. They lifted sanctions on Russia. The United States showing some sanity. Yeah, we want to restore some stability to the markets. And what did they do yesterday? They have reimposed the sanctions.
Yeah. So the U.S. expects Strait of Hormuz to be kept open and the same day it reimposes sanction on Iranian oil. Yes. No, this is not going to work out.
Earlier today, we had a show that was dedicated to the then breaking news this morning that the Strait of Hormuz had been opened, and that was according to the Iranian foreign minister and to the president of the United States. Both of them said the same thing. And we were taking a look at what all that meant, what the people were saying underneath it, what else went along with it, and then some of the ramifications of it. Then we came back later in the day, and we had Larry Johnson, who talked to us about looking beyond the ceasefire time here, how could this be over? And there were several options we looked at. In the process of doing that second show, we thought we were going to have Professor Marandi from Tehran University, who was going to come and tell us that, no kidding, here's what the Iranian side is saying. We see what the American side is saying. But like is a hallmark of our channel here, we want to listen to everybody. It's important to listen to people. Then it's all much more important to look at what actually happens on the ground. We did that in the Russia-Ukraine war. We're doing it here. Now then, though, subsequent to that, we got Professor Marandi back, and I was able to record a short interview with him, which I'm going to play in just a second. But as a setup to that, because there's been additional news coming from President Trump that we need to have. And when you hear what President Trump is saying now, in light of what Professor Marandi says here in a minute, it's going to make a little bit more sense and maybe not in that great of a direction, at least.
Yeah, this video is full of interesting points.
It's a little bit more troubling. First of all, two reporters. First of all, here we're going to have Weijia Jiang. This is from CBS News. She says, President Trump tells me, apparently she got on a phone call with him, no ground troops will be required to remove the enriched uranium from Iran. That was one of the things that President Trump said earlier today, that we're going to get all the so-called nuclear dust, as he calls it. Then he said Iran has a...
This is more of the insane stuff coming out of Trump administration today.
Agreed. This is important here. Iran has agreed to stop backing all proxy groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. And I asked if Iran had agreed to stop enriching uranium forever. He said they've agreed to everything.
Yes. So according to Trump, today, for no reason, Iran decided to completely surrender to the United States and give Trump everything he wanted. It's batshit insane.
And you're like, did they though? Did they really agree to everything? That's not all. Then there was an additional, sorry, I'm on the wrong spot here.
I mean, when you turn around and ask the Iranians, is this true? They say, no, it isn't. They clearly say, no, it isn't.
There was an additional comment by a different reporter from News Nation, Kelly Meyer. So she also got on the phone with President Trump. So he's very chatty today. And she said, I just spoke with President Trump from Las Vegas and asked him about the stream of true socials he has been sharing. I got right to the point. I asked President Trump if Iran agreed to stop enriching. Yes, he told me. They've agreed to stop enriching uranium. They agreed to everything, he told me. Yes, are you surprised? I asked, are you surprised? He told me, I'm not surprised by anything. And then he said, see you later. And the call ended after that. So you have right there, President Trump claiming that.
So why, Trump, are you approaching weapons manufacturers and asking them to make more weapons?
Iran has agreed to no enrichment.
Or automakers.
Agreed to stop supporting their proxies, and that there's going to get rid of the reprocessing material, and that they're going to open the Strait of Hormuz, and that he is going to keep our blockade in place. All those things have been said. The
Yes,
Iranian side has said
all of
very much different things, even in the official statements where they said that the opening is contingent upon several things.
it is true. We do have to build back our stockpiles of weapons, even if there is peace. And yeah, so that could make sense in that context. But I'm pretty sure the war is continuing.
Which we're going to get to in this interview here. But so with that as a setup, and that's since the interview that we recorded just an hour or so ago, here is Professor Marandi. And on the backside, I'm going to share with you some of the ramifications of what this means and what the cost has been for America. President Trump announces that the Strait of Hormuz is completely open and ready for business and full passage, but the naval blockade will remain in full force and effect as it pertains to Iran. Well, then a couple of hours later, a foreign ministry spokesman for Iran said that this is contingent upon the implementation of certain terms and conditions for a ceasefire in Lebanon. And if the naval blockade continues, it will be considered a violation of the ceasefire and the passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be closed. Where are we in this? Because it seems like those two.
Obviously, Iran's not going to open the Strait of Hormuz while U.S. continues a naval blockade of Iran. That's insane.
Two statements are incompatible and they can't both be true.
There's another thing that first comes to mind for me, and that is that what we're seeing right now is basically that happened 10 days ago. The United States has finally forced Israelis to end the slaughter.
Yes. The ceasefire, remember, agreed last Monday, the Monday before last, and then took them 10 days to get to this point to get Israel to stop bombing. And so I think back then, Iran had foolishly agreed to open the Strait of Hormuz, which would be giving up all the negotiating leverage. But thanks to Israel, they had a perfect excuse to keep it closed for the next 10 days. And now they could just slow roll the supposed opening of the strait until they know Trump is going to start bombing in a couple of days anyway.
And just today, they murdered someone with a drone. So the ceasefire is not real. Just like in Gaza, they continue to murder people.
Yeah.
They're doing that in Lebanon. And that's the
Yes.
Israeli.
Ceasefire with Israel isn't worth the paper it's written on. They see, oh, I want to kill that guy. They'll just kill that guy. See an opportunity to take out someone they want to take out, they'll do it.
way. They just like killing people. And they really take pleasure in this. But what I think is happening is that this agreement that was signed that was agreed upon, this framework that was agreed upon 10 days ago is finally, let's say, being implemented, the murder aside, by the Israeli regime. So the Iranians have agreed to open the Strait of Hormuz. That's what the commitment was. But the Strait of Hormuz is going to be open under certain conditions. In other words, the route that the ships have to take, and they're going to have to get permission from the Iran, and also naval military ships will not be able to pass through. So I would assume that the number of ships that pass through are going to be limited for now.
And I also think there are intelligent people in Iran, unlike whatever idiot agreed to open the Strait of Hormuz for the ceasefire. Whoever that was an absolute idiot. But anyway, the IRGC is not. It knows that Strait of Hormuz are its leverage, its pressure point on the United States. It's not just going to throw them open.
And the Iranians have said that if the United States continues to place a siege on Iranian ports, they started the war. After all of this is because the United States started an unprovoked war. Now that they've imposed a siege on Iran's ports, I think that Iran will ultimately block the ships from exiting the Strait of Hormuz. But Iran will give the U.S. a bit of time to change their stance. So we'll have to see what the United States does. But what I think, and this is just a personal take, I'm not, as I said, I'm not in government. I'm not a government spokesman. I never was. Even when I went to Islamabad, they just asked me to accompany them. I wasn't paid, and I'm not a negotiator. So this is a personal take. I think that there's a significant chance that Trump is, of course, making up all this stuff, which he is.
He is making it all up.
Iran agreed to this, Iran agreed to that, which is all nonsense. So that perhaps that in 3 or 4 days, he can say Iran promised all these things, but now they've refused to abide by their commitments, non-existent commitments. You get what I'm saying? So he's saying that the Iranians have agreed to A, B, C, D, E, and F.
Exactly.
And then in 2 or 3 days, he said they promised all these things, which they didn't, but they're not doing them. So what happens next? A military assault.
I don't think this is wrong, but I would put it more like this. Trump is demanding or saying everything, the fake things he's saying. That's what Trump needs for political survival. Trump is basically saying, demanding what he needs. It's saying it's fait accompli. Ever heard the expression, faking it till you make it? That's what he's doing here on a grand scale. He's faking it, making all these things, and he's just praying that Iran somehow goes along with it because that's what he needs to survive. And if he doesn't get what he needs, yes, he starts bombing again. But he's not. Iran's not going to capitulate and give him and roll over like roll over dead. No, he's fucked.
I think that the chances for a renewed U.S. war against Iran are actually quite high.
99%.
And I think that the language used by Trump, and I may be completely wrong,
Actually, probably 100.
because Trump says lots of nonsense. And he's constantly contradicting himself. He's constantly making things up. He says something 1 hour and then something completely different the next hour. And I've said repeatedly to people, I do try never to interpret Trump because I can't. I just don't know what goes on in his head.
Probably pretty smart.
But if one was to conclude that there is something behind these attacks, it could just be
There is nothing behind these. They're batshit insane that Iran would open the Strait of Hormuz while allowing the United States to continue blockading all Iranian ships. I mean, all ships except Iranian ships can go through the Strait of Hormuz. That situation, you think Iran would allow that? It's insane.
another string of like crazy texts, crazy tweets, or true social posts. But if it isn't, if they are, let's say for once we take him, say that he has some real strategy.
You
lying
shouldn't
behind
do
this,
that.
I would say that he's trying to make it seem like Iran agreed to something so that later on he can say that Iran refrained from carrying out what it promised to do, thus justifying another war. I think that's possible.
Well, and in fact,
There is a reason for him to bring all these troops. I mean, I don't think the weather is getting warm. We're heading towards summer. The costs for the United States are enormous. There's no fighting going on. The 40-day war was not a success for the United States. So I think that this is something that should be taken very seriously.
And let's just take a look at those. It's not just the Strait of Hormuz he's talking about. You mentioned, A, B, C, and D. Well, let me look at least two of those other enumerated things that President Trump has said. And here he is on the Truth Social. Says the USA will get all the nuclear dust created by our great B-2 bombers. It's
Yeah, they've responded to this, said basically never in 1,000 million years will they turn over this nuclear dust. Basically, the gist of what Iran's response to this tweet is.
referring to the operation in 2025. No money will exchange hands in any way, shape, or form. This deal is in no way subject to Lebanon either. And then he goes on a little bit or later this because he said a lot of things this morning.
Oh, yeah, he was busy today.
See if I can roll up and find it. The Iran has agreed to never close the Strait of Hormuz.
Again, why would Iran throw away its greatest leverage? Roll over
Again,
dead.
it will never be used as a weapon. So my question to you is, did Iran agree that they would never use the Strait of Hormuz again? And did they agree that they would give away all the dust and that they would get nothing in return for it?
Yeah, all that is just made up stuff. And that is A, B, C, D, and maybe E and F too, if we keep looking. So again, I'm not saying that there will definitely be war, but I think that if we are going to take these posts seriously, the fact that they're all fake, every single one of them, every single one of these that you just read
Yes.
are fake.
Just like a couple of weeks ago, there were fake negotiations where Trump's saying the negotiations were going really well, and the Iranians were like confused, like we aren't even talking to Trump. And yeah,
Then to me, and I may be wrong, it may be an ordinary day for Donald Trump where he just says nonsense. But if I, for once, was going to say that
the nonsense Trumps usually speak, wasn't this extreme? I've during the election cycle, I watched his speech, whatever. Nothing the lies he told were never this bold, this brazen, this easily exposable. I think he's trapped by this Iran war, and he's just started lying in a way he's never has before.
well, in this case, let's take a look and see maybe he could be serious. I would say this is to prepare a justification for another murderous war.
And so let's look at that, because I mean, when I saw those things, I thought, why would Iran ever agree to give away all those things for nothing? Why would they agree to open the Strait of Hormuz from their side and allow it to stay blocked on the other side? That seemed irrational to me and illogical. But from what you're saying, at least as far as you've been told, none of those things are accurate.
That's right. I mean, first of all, the ceasefire in Lebanon is obviously all about Iran. Iran was supposed to allow ships to pass through, more ships. I mean, it was never completely closed. But ships that are linked to Iran's adversaries, these regimes in the Persian Gulf who helped the United States wage war, they're not friends. They killed Iranians. But Iran was supposed to allow more ships to go through. But because the Israeli regime began slaughtering the people of Lebanon in an outrageous manner a few days ago, just carpet bombed city after city, it was clear that they wanted to wreck the ceasefire. And so because
That did
the United
happen.
States violated its side of the bargain, the Iranians did not allow those extra ships to go through. So the last 10 days, we could have had a large number of ships heading for different ports across the world.
True. They wouldn't have opened it completely, but I think they would have opened it more, and they would have made a gesture of goodwill and allowed more ship through. But since Israel said, fuck that.
To ease the economic strain. But Netanyahu prevented it. So Iran kept up the pressure, and Trump put pressure on Netanyahu. And the night before last, there was supposed to be a ceasefire. Netanyahu again failed to deliver. And then Iran made an extra threat, said, well, if this is going to continue, we're going to strike Israel. And that tipped the balance, and it was over. Of course, the Americans are going to say that the Israelis and the Lebanese government sat together and had tea, and Netanyahu said, wow, that was nice, and so let's end the war. That's the narrative that they're promoting, and no sane person
I think he's talking from Iran. That's why the quality of his video is maybe not great.
will believe it. But so this had very much to do with Iran. Iran has not agreed to hand over anything. Iran has not agreed to keep the Strait of Hormuz forever open. Iran has not agreed to any of the things that Trump has been saying. So why would Trump say it? Either he's just making up stuff to manipulate the market, which is quite possible because today's Friday.
It is Friday.
It's the last day of the week, and he's succeeded in bringing down the.
I think that the ceasefire ends on Monday, but I think there's a good chance, because that's the way Trump operates, that he's going to start the next bombing campaign during the ceasefire, like Saturday or Sunday. Because, yeah, I mean, you could wait till negotiations are over and start bombing, but no, Trump never did that. So why would he wait for the ceasefire to end before he starts his next round of bombing?
The price of oil. He's done that multiple times. That's the one thing he's good at. He's not good at anything else. But
Yeah, there's the number right
here-
there. That's quite a bit lower right there, as you can see.
yeah,
Yeah, that is. They have managed. I said that they'd do this to keep the price of oil down for 2 months, is what I said at the very beginning, is what I expected. At least 2 months. And we're nearly there. The war is like 7 weeks in. It's nearly at the 2-month mark. And they have successfully kept oil prices down from reaching over 100. It's that was some amazing constant manipulation do that.
yes, exactly. But in reality, the oil, there's still the shortage of oil is still increasing every day. The shortage is getting worse.
Yep.
Oil, even if we have a number of
Oil is still trading at $150 in the physical market.
limited ships going through the strait,
$50 above the futures.
there's a lot of damage done to the facilities in the Persian Gulf, and the way in which the Iranians have designed things, the number of ships that are going to go through are not all that great. So the shortage is going to get bigger and bigger, at least for the time being. And it's going to take time for things to start up. But I think that we should not discount this notion that Trump is going. It's like me saying that you promised to give me $20,000 to, I don't know, to do this or that. And then I tell everyone, I say, well, you also promised this. And then at the end, I say you lied on this and you lied on that and you lied. And you never made a single commitment to me in the first place. But now I'm saying that you're indebted to me. You lied to me. You promised A, B, C, D, and F.
Yep.
And this is my response, or this is what I'm going to do about it. This is how I have a, I think all of this can be interpreted.
And let me ask you one more thing. And I know you're running real short on.
Yeah, it's that, and the other half of it is that Trump is desperate and he's making up things that he wishes were true. Wishful thinking. He wishes everything he tweets out today is true, because if everything he tweeted out today is true, then he's saved politically, and his presidency isn't over. And so it's just pure wishful thinking, and he's going to try to make his wishful thinking a reality, and it's not going to work.
Time for two more quick questions. One is President Trump last night made a comment here about how reasonable the new Iranian regime, as he calls it, is being willing to be. Let me show you what he said and then ask your view on the backside.
Blockade has been incredible. It's held. And they're not doing any business. They're unable to do any business because of the blockade. And so the combination of having no Navy, having no Air Force, having no anti-aircraft equipment, they have nothing. Everything is gone, including the.
I will mention, this was something I heard that was surprising, is basically a general from Pakistan visited Iran the other day. And when he came in, 2 Iranian fighter jets escorted his airplane to Tehran. Iranian fighter jets. That means they still have fighter jets. They're like old. They can't actually compete with, or they have no way of actually competing with our aircrafts in the sky, but they do still have fighter jets. So it's probably hidden under a mountain somewhere. Comes out, takes off from a runway next to the mountain, is my guess. And so Iranian still has an air force. It's not completely destroyed. 7 weeks into this war, it still has fighter jets.
Their leaders. Now they have a new set of leaders, and we find them very reasonable.
So we find them very reasonable. First of all, do you agree with his characterization that Iran has nothing and it's lost everything? Because if that's the case, I don't know why we bothered with the ceasefire. We should have just given you terms of surrender. But what about this reasonable new leadership?
Yeah, I mean, why bother with a ceasefire if Iran's agreed to everything? Yeah, just have them surrender.
It's like everything else he says. It's just, it's none of it makes any sense. They're all, and he's been saying that a long time. He's been saying that they're begging for a deal. They want to do whatever I say, and it's just, that's why I'm not sure that the interpretation that I provided is necessarily true. That he wants to create some sort of fake justification for war, because he could just be talking nonsense, as he does all the time. I mean, as I said before, whenever people ask me, what do you think Trump means by this? I say, and this is a fact. I never
really watched Trump either. I watched clips of him on maybe Asmund's YouTube channel. But I just don't watch his speeches because, he exaggerates everything. He is not a reliable source of information, even if you're his supporter.
Trump. I don't read his posts unless it's like unless someone puts it in a group or something where I see it. I never watch him. I only read the headlines because it doesn't help me. I don't get anything from it because he'll say one thing today and something else some other day. So I'm just not going to waste my time listening to him anymore. But again, taking into consideration he's brought so many troops into the region. Before the war started, I believed that there was going to be war. I always told, in media, I would say I don't know because I don't want to, create any concern. I just say you have to be prepared either way. But when you bring in all these troops and you bring in all these weapons and you bring in all these planes, it's highly unlikely that this is just about a bluff. Someone wants a bluff and maybe get some concessions.
Every time Trump has built up military assets in the Persian Gulf, he has ended up using them.
Walk away. So right now, the United States under Trump is bringing in more weapons and more troops. So my belief is that the chances of war are actually very high. And here, correct me if I'm wrong. I was in the military 100 years ago in my youth, and I was never like yourself, a trained officer. So I cannot pretend that I know nearly as much as you do. We are approaching hotter weather very soon, and within a month, in a month from now, it's going to start getting very hot and humid in the Arabian Peninsula and the Persian Gulf. And I think fighting war is going to be much more difficult. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. You may say no, with the new capabilities and technologies, that's not really the case. But
they haven't invented portable air conditioning yet.
But when the United States took Kuwait from Saddam, and when the United States invaded Iraq, it was in spring. We are at the end stage of the cooler weather in the Persian Gulf, and in a month from now, the weather is going to increase rapidly, and it will get very hot. And they have sandstorms and all these things. I think that if Trump wanted to attack Iran, the more he waits, the more difficult it becomes. In this respect,
no doubt. I can certainly. I actually went through one of those sandstorms and Desert Storm in 1991, so I have direct experience with what you're talking.
There is that aspect because it's more difficult as time goes on. But you have to remember, Trump thought this to be over in 3 days. There was no preparation for a prolonged bombing campaign or an operation on the ground. So the bombs and the troops have to be moved into the region. So and that takes time. So a combination of being completely unprepared, which means you need preparation time, and then you have this deadline of the summer where it becomes too hot to do anything. So troops being rushed into the area.
Talk about it. It's no picnic. So we'll have to wait and see again on that too. So I hope that's.
So again, this is all speculation.
Yeah.
I want your viewers to know I have no insider knowledge. All I did was I'm just saying that this could be an interpretation of what Trump is.
He traveled with the negotiators, Iranian negotiators, to Pakistan. So it may be all speculation, but he is connected with the Iranian side, and he has a pretty good read on what the Iranians are thinking. And Trump's tweets are complete nonsense.
Is doing, and also since I think that in a month from now or 2 months from now, it becomes really impossible to fight a war in that heat. I mean, the soldiers would be demoralized. So he doesn't have much of a window of opportunity, since you confirmed that.
Agreed. Always listen to all sources.
What I thought is not incorrect. So I think that the chances for a war in the coming days and the coming couple of weeks is probably quite high.
So
99, if not 100%.
What do you make of the president's comment that the new Iranian leadership is more reasonable, because that would have to mean Mustafa Khamenei, whose parents were killed in this, whose wife, his other family members, who he himself was apparently wounded. Is he going to be more reasonable than Ali Khamenei was?
Well, I believe that Ayatollah Khamenei, the father, was very reasonable, and I see him as a martyr. But I don't think anything has changed. I don't think he means it that way. I just think he's, when I was a kid, they used to say he's winging it. I just think that he's just saying things. And that's why
I say he's floundering. He's desperate. His presidency is over, but he's not willing to recognize that fact. So he's just making up a pretend make-believe reality where Iran surrenders to him and he's the hero and everything works out well, and he's just going to pretend that. And then when his pretend doesn't work, he's going to throw a tantrum and bomb Iran with a lot of bombs when the entire Middle East is going to go up in flames. And he's going to go, oops, my bad.
This interpretation of mine, this possible interpretation of mine, can be easily rejected because that's what Trump does all the time.
Well, that's true. Yeah, we certainly live that. We have to watch it every day, so it's a little more of a challenge for me. Listen, I know your time's about out. Last question: forget about what Trump says or anything else. Forget about the weather or anything else. What does Iran need? What if you could say like 3 things that they are non-negotiables in order to bring this war to an end, so that their traffic can go back through the Strait of Hormuz? What do they have to have from the United States?
Well, the 10-point plan, of course, is the basis of the negotiations. Trump accepted that, and they're not unreasonable demands. Iran did not lose the war. I would argue that Iran won the war. But if you want to summarize it in the 3 words, I'd say sovereignty, compensation, and security for Iran's friends across the region.
And so what is that compensation? What does that look like? Is it setting up a toll booth? Is it physically getting some cash? What does that look like?
I think that Iran will force these Arab family regimes in the Persian Gulf to pay that compensation, whether it's through the Strait of Hormuz or a combination of things. I don't know, but I think that is what they're going to do. And they're
It'll be through Strait of Hormuz because it's simply the easiest way to do it.
probably going to use the focus on the Strait of Hormuz to get that done.
So therefore, if the U.S. is not willing to give any money or to allow a toll booth type situation set up, and if they say we demand that you don't have control of the Strait of Hormuz, then the war will continue on. Is that a fair statement?
Iran is going to control the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran is going to get money from ships. It may allow some ships to pay less, or very friendly countries to be treated differently, but Iran is going to do that. But I think that in the case of Trump, if he wants to go to war, it will have nothing really to do with the Strait of Hormuz or anything else. It'll be because Netanyahu and the Zionist lobby want a war.
And last question: If the ceasefire does come to an end next week, or whenever it does, and the U.S. goes back to bombing, as you fear he may be setting up the case for, what will be the Iranian reaction?
Well, actually, I'm not quite sure he'll wait till the ceasefire comes to an end. He may try to surprise Iran. After all, every time Iran negotiates, he tries to initiate a war. So there's no reason to believe that he will wait for the ceasefire to end. I'm sure the Iranian armed forces are fully prepared as we speak for war, but I think the Iranian response will be devastating. We saw that by the end of the war, Iran was hitting harder than early on in the war, and Iran is preparing itself for the next phase. I think that the United States, when they try to take the islands, Iran and some territory, I think the Iranians will let them do that, and then the Iranians will start hammering them with drones and missiles, and let this go on for weeks, if not months, and just.
Oh yeah, nothing would be worse for the United States or better for Iran than if we go in and try to seize some Iranian territory. They'll just be salivating because they've been hitting all these countries all the way across the Gulf, but an island right off their coast that they can reach artillery, they'll just pound those positions, and so many U.S. servicemen will die. They'll keep dying until Trump gives up and retreats. It'll be a disaster.
Just make them bleed and pay, and Iran will continue to destroy vessels in the Persian Gulf that move towards the Strait of Hormuz. And if Iran's infrastructure is destroyed, it'll destroy the infrastructure on the other side of the Persian Gulf. And this is another important point. It's going, as we discussed earlier, it's going to get very hot in a month. And these Arab regimes in the Persian Gulf, if their electricity goes, everyone will have to leave. They will have to get in their cars and travel across Saudi Arabia and just get out of there. Go to Iraq, go to Jordan. These countries will collapse, every single one of them. Here in Iran, if they start striking our power plants, it will hurt us. But Tehran, we have snow on the mountains right out. If I look out the window, if I'm in a place where I could see beyond the other buildings, there's snow on the mountains. There's a huge difference between the Qatar and the Emirates and Kuwait and Bahrain and Iran. If their critical infrastructure is destroyed, first of all, it can be destroyed in a couple of days completely. They will all have to leave in a month from now.
Just to give you an idea, Saudi Arabia in summer, we're talking 120 degrees Fahrenheit. It's insufferable. It's can't sleep at that temperature. It's that's why everyone would have to leave. You have to remember that the cities in Saudi Arabia are warmer than the surrounding area because of all concrete, and they're definitely at maybe 125 degrees Fahrenheit. Absolute inside houses, inside apartment buildings that have glass, it gets even like 130, 140. It's cooked because of greenhouse effects. So yeah, it's just without air conditioning, though. Just unlivable.
On the other hand, if they strike Iran's critical infrastructure, it will take much longer. And by the time that they go halfway through, there's complete collapse on the other side. this is not a winnable situation for the United States. They will lose the war. The global economy will be destined to destined to fall into a deep depression, worse than 1929 if there's war, and it will be catastrophic.
Trump's presidency died since he bombed the supreme leader of Iran. Ever since then, he's just been making believe that he's winning the war and pretending, wishful thinking. And his presidency is still artificially extended through this make-believe that the U.S. media is going along with. But eventually, reality will set in, and either through the economic impact of the Strait of Hormuz closure or through whatever misguided ventures Trump tries to change the situation. No matter what happens, reality will set in and the Trump presidency will be over. And it'll probably cost Republicans midterms and leading to a Trump impeachment.
For humanity. It will be something beyond my mental comprehension because tens, if not hundreds of people will go hungry. Tens, if not hundreds of millions of people will be on the move looking for somewhere to save themselves. It will be awful. But God be with us all.
Well, yeah, that's an outcome that we hope desperately doesn't materialize, and that's why we're so strongly advocating any kind of a negotiated deal that both sides can live with minimally and then move on, because everything else is catastrophic or worse in comparison. Thank you.
For the world economy, for everyone, for the Gulf states, for Iran even. But one thing is Trump. Any type of agreement, like I said, he's living in pretend make-believe land and doing type of agreement that Danielle Davis has suggested would mean him facing reality and accepting the end of his presidency. And Trump isn't willing to do that. His ego won't let him.
Thank you so much for coming on today.
One final point. Sure. One final point. And that's why I keep telling people to go and read that book, Going to Tehran. And maybe you can invite Flint and Hillary Leverett once on your show. Mm-hmm. They showed the way forward, but the people in Washington decided to take the route chosen for them by the Zionists. And that's what's leading us towards catastrophe.
Everything is pointing in that direction, and let us hope that we can find an off-ramp. But thank you so much. I know your time is really valuable. Thank you so much for peeling some time off for us. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Not at all.
And that was our interview right there. So listen, a lot of big points that he made in there. One of the things I want to highlight, something that he said, just as kind of a go forward. He said, I'm not a member of the Iranian government. I don't have any specific insider information of what they're doing. But the one thing we have to understand is that he was invited by the government to the last round of negotiations because he understds the way they think.
And he traveled with the negotiators. And funny, on the way back, they were so afraid that the United States, Israel, would try to bomb the negotiators. They actually landed their plane in northeast Iran and then traveled by train the rest of the way to Tehran. Because Israel has a history of killing negotiators.
Obviously, he has connections with the West, like in our channel here. But it's also important to understand that he is a combat veteran. He fought in the Iran-Iraq War, and that he certainly understands how the Iranians think. And so when he gives his personal opinion, which he stressed several times, you've got to say that's got a pretty good likelihood of being true.
Yeah, modern buildings aren't designed like classic Middle Eastern buildings with cooling towers and underground pools, etc. Yeah, in the past, there are a lot of things you can do to keep cool without air conditioning, or at least lower the temperature somewhat. Like spreading water out on a stone surface in the heat. The water will evaporate and lower the temperature, the surrounding place. So having pools of water, it can lower the temperature. Having lots of open windows and stuff so air can flow. All of that's important. But modern buildings are built to be airtight and air conditioning. And you don't have power. My God, it's utterly unlivable in the Middle East.
True. And we're going to find out here because there's versions of what President Trump is saying, both in his Truth Socials and in those interviews that I just showed you before. And what he's saying and what the Iranian side is saying in their social media posts are incompatible. They cannot both be true. It cannot be that the Iranians have only agreed to open the strait if all these conditions are met, one of which is the Americans dropping their blockade, and then the American side saying, no, only the Iranian side agreed to drop their blockade, and we're going to keep ours up, and then they're going to give away their reprocessing, they're going to give away their enriched material, they're going to stop supporting proxies and all that kind of stuff.
It's amazing. I wonder if there's even someone in the administration that's going along with Trump's delusion and telling him, oh, really, Iran agreed to all this? Yes, really, Mr. President, and is fueling his delusion. Or if it's just self-imposed delusions.
The maximalist position that was given before, which Iran had agreed to at least put on the table prior to this war. So we had that possible. We actually had those outcomes within diplomatic reach before we threw that away by starting a war. Now we're going to wait and see. We'll see who was right, who was wrong. Maybe President Trump knows something that we don't know, and that something that Professor Marandi doesn't know. And that behind the scenes, they have agreed to these things, and they're going to somehow capitulate. I give about a fraction of 1% for that to be the case, because that would be irrational,
About the same, yes.
illogical to go against everything the Iranian side does, and it would contravene the leverage that they have in their hands and within their power. It would be illogical for someone with those kind of assets to just give them away for literally nothing in return. Or if President Trump,
I've said it all along. The only way for Trump to get out of this live is if Iran shows mercy to him and open Strait of Hormuz and surrenders to him unconditionally for no reason at all, despite hating him. Yep. Less than 0.1% chance.
is going to get in those things, then what did he promise them? Because nobody is going to give away something like that after they had just survived a 6-week war of all 13,000 attacks, and they have emerged still intact, is going to then just suddenly give them away for nothing. So either Trump isn't telling us everything, or what he's telling us isn't true. And as you see on the screen right there, you see the Central Command. That apparently is live. The U.S. naval blockade continues. So they're saying that, at least as for us, this continues. Now we'll wait and see what impact that has on the Iranians.
This just now, if this is continuing, why would Iran open the straits?
Their blockade then consequently still continue as well. That's what time will tell. Well, listen, one of the things that I wanted to talk about here, and what Professor Marandi said there.
This is live, by the way, so it would update. Precious show, and if the Straits of Hormuz were actually open, there would be a ship in this region at some point.
The end, when I ask him very poignantly, if diplomacy fails and if the ceasefire doesn't hold and we turn back into conflict, and by whatever means, and it goes back into a hot war, and the U.S. returns to attacking Iran, what would they do? And he described to you right there about hitting critical infrastructure. If we hit their critical infrastructure, they're going to hit ours and our allies in the region, which would cause just utter devastation. And obviously, then the strait would not be opened up. Oil would.
Yeah, if all the oil infrastructure is destroyed, it doesn't matter if the Straits of Hormuz are open anymore or not.
Definitely not be flowing out under any of the circumstances. But why did we get in this war in the first place? Why are we still waging it? There was all these comments, and I've shown you a few of them where.
Because Netanyahu convinced Trump that it'd be over in 3 days. And Trump believed this, and he also believed in his arrogance that we're the United States. We can bully anyone we want. There's no consequences. I mean, how could the United States ever lose to little ragtag Iran? It's impossible. How could there actually be a risk in bombing Iran's supreme leader? Risk? What are you talking about? We're the United States. We can do whatever the fuck we want, and the rest of the world has to live with it. If we want to bomb Iran, we can. Why not? That's Asmongold, basically, opinion. He's not recognized the reality that Iran controls a critical waterway in the Straits of Hormuz, and we're absolutely fucked if they close it.
Senator Kennedy of Louisiana said the other day, well, this is because they hate us, and they were going to get a nuclear weapon, and they were going to kill us. Well, that's been debunked. Everybody knows now by the word of the vice president and the president himself, who said
they've had nuclear reactors for over like 50 years now or something. They could have obtained a nuclear weapon a dozen times over decades ago if they wanted to. They didn't. If they wanted a nuclear weapon, they'd be armed. North Korea is much smaller, less sophisticated than Iran, and they have a nuke. Of course, Iran could do the same.
That there was no imminent threat because all of the nuclear material is entombed and buried under these facilities, and we have satellite assets on it to prove that it's not true. Well, and then, okay, now we're starting to see things come out. Even thank you for putting that up there, Gary. That says 40 minutes ago, Iran denies Trump's claim that uranium will be transferred to the United States. So that now you're going to have to say who you're going to believe. Well, you're going to believe whatever turns out to be true in the future. And unfortunately, and this is embarrassing to have to admit, so far, some of the things that we've seen by the Iranian side, at least more of them, have proven to be true. And the things that we have said at the senior levels have proven to be false or just a deception. Not to say that the Iranians are a paragon of truth. They'll be dishonest and they'll be deceptive anytime they feel like it's going to be to their view. That's how war works. So you have to just accept that that's how it is for all the sides. You got to try to pierce through the words and look at what. That's why we're always so focused on this channel. Every time we look at what is true on the ground, we hear what people are saying, but what's true on the ground.
That's why first thing I do when I hear it Strait of Hormuz open, I check the reality and see that it's not the case.
And what's true on the ground right now is that the United States has suffered terribly in this war. And that's what I want to leave you with and understand here. When you hear people say that we had to do this or this is somehow that
it has suffered terribly, but economically speaking, that pain is still to come.
We're going to win. Let me tell you what it's cost us so far, and then let me project out what the cost could be if we don't get this shut off really quick.
Oh, this is good.
You know, a couple of days ago, I did a show where the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, lectured the U.S. media corps, and you just pointed a bony finger at them and threatened it with a lot of biblical admonitions and basically said, you guys are insufficiently loyal. And he said at one point, whose side are you on? Remember that? Remember when he asked that, whose side are you on? Well, I can tell you yesterday because I'm obviously one of those he was wagging a finger at.
The media should be on the side of the truth. That's the only side the media should be on.
Because I'm not cheerleading with whatever the Pentagon says, and I'm not having a bunch of fluff pieces, which is weirdly what he actually asked for in his examples of why people aren't covering more fluff and why they are talking the truth, because that's what we do. We're unintimidated and uncompromised to tell you the truth, no matter what it is. And so we're on one of those.
A long time ago, 100 years ago, that's the way U.S. media operated.
Finger wagging. Well, I can tell you for unequivocally, whose side am I on? I am on America's side. I am on Americans' side. I'm on the side of the U.S. Constitution and of the people of our country. And I may reasonably ask, whose side are these war advocates on? Whose side is the Secretary of War on? Because if he's advocating for our security and for our defense, then one may reasonably ask, have we been better off because we went down the path that you advocated and that you lusted for and that you're eagerly applying? Because so far, this is just a partial list here.
We aren't.
Let's tell you what we've had here. This has cost U.S. Troops 13 have been officially killed. It could be.
It's probably higher. They're probably, and if you count U.S. contractors in the Middle East that are U.S. citizens and they're working and helping our military, yeah, that is probably definitely some deaths there too. Yeah, it's got I'd be amazed if when all said is done, it's only 13 deaths.
More. We'll wait to see. There's been some question about whether or not we've been, the Pentagon has been hiding some of the casualty lists, but at least 13 we know of are dead. 400 have been wounded. 13 U.S. bases in the Middle East have been damaged or destroyed so much that we had to evacuate them.
There's some reliable reports. It's at least 700 injuries.
13 combat fixed-wing aircraft have been destroyed. 6 helicopters have been destroyed. A number of others have been harmed. 24 MQ-9 Reapers have been destroyed or shot down. That's costing us about $3 billion on that by itself. 10 radar systems and arrays, at least officially, at a cost of $3.
This is so costly for us because it takes rare earths to rebuild these radars, and we ain't getting that from China.
$0.5 billion have been destroyed. That's completely destroyed. So you're talking already. We're on the price tag of around $200 billion, which is already a supplemental going through Congress right now, on top of the $1.5 trillion that we're trying to get for the next year's regular budget. Just think about that. $200 billion so far. And just we saw with the Iraq war, the 2003 Iraq war, where they had those supplemental budget requests that came through constantly on top of the regular defense budget, turned into hundreds of billions of dollars. This one's starting in the hundreds of billions of dollars category, and it's open-ended. So they're going to continue. So on top of all these physical costs, there's also the cost that we're trying to get back to continue the war, like a couple of $1 billion per day. And then you look at some of the other issues that goes along with that. Our regional allies have been severely harmed. Their interests have been severely degraded.
Oh, yes.
Their physical infrastructure has been attacked.
Even there's been huge actual physical damage, but beyond that, just shutting down of traffic through Strait of Hormuz has hurt them, enormously. But their image as a place of safety, all these Gulf nations where they held like the World Cup, for example, in Qatar. Well, that's not going to happen again.
And destroyed. It's going to take hundreds of millions of dollars in many of the cases, billions in some other cases, many months to years to replace some of those, like the Pars gas field for Qatar. Others in Kuwait has suffered a lot of damage. Bahrain has really suffered a lot of damage. UAE has suffered a lot of damage. Our allies, people who put their trust in the United States, have suffered really bad so far. That's in the physical damage. Then there's also the loss of income, because with the Strait of Hormuz effectively shut down or controlled by the Iranian side, their income has been radically declined.
Practically gone in a lot of cases. Saudi Arabia can still export a little bit through its southern coast. It's pumping some oil from over here across its pipeline and loading it on ships over here. But that can get shut down too by the Houthis and Iran, either bombing the pipeline or closing traffic through the Red Sea.
So their operating budgets are all in freefall. They're trying to figure out how they're going to feed their people, how they're going to just conduct their affairs of state. They can borrow money, but that only gets you so far down the line. Also, because traffic's not coming in, all the foodstuffs and everything they need to feed their
And if they really need to get desperate, they'll maybe try to start selling their U.S. assets, U.S. Treasury bonds, to finance themselves. And I think they'll be on very, very severe pressure from the United States not to do this, because the United States is going to be selling a lot of Treasury bonds themselves. It's a terrible situation for the Gulf states.
population is also in severe shortage because they can't get stuff in or out. So they're really suffering. Our allies in Asia, Africa, Europe, they're all.
Yeah, but this is still open here. The port's over here. So food, it's worse if you're in this region. If you're Qatar or Bahrain, and you have to have the food move all the way through land this way. But for like the United Emirates, they basically have access to supplies like food. That's not an issue, at least.
Suffering as well. We've been showing you there's already they're trying to get fuel in South Korea. They've had to ration it. The Philippines, Vietnam, all in serious problems. Australia, they've got problems with both diesel fuel and with fertilizers, and the fertilizer issue is hitting everybody. That's another thing that's already baked in. Problems in the fall when these foodstuffs that we're trying to get planted right now come to fruition, because it's costing more to get it to put in the ground, because what fertilizer there is from other sources in the world is now, because of supply and demand, at a much higher cost per unit, if there's even enough, because there isn't enough. So that means that they're having to make do with less, which means that your yield is going to be less when it comes up. And of course, with the increasing price of diesel fuel, which nearly all farm equipment runs on, the cost of that's going to go up too. So their margins are shrinking by the day, and so many of them are already baked in to be in the red for this year. And that's just this year. So that means that when the food starts getting produced in the fall during harvest time, when it starts coming to market, it's also for everybody else, to include the United States, is going to be.
The food crisis is for next year, because it's fall harvest is when the shortfalls in yields will happen. So months away, and then that get worked into price. It's by this time next year, food prices will be at their peak.
Be more as well. And then we have in the United States itself, our farmers are suffering already because they suffer the same problem with diesel and with the fertilizer issue. It hits us just as much. So there's problems baked in here. Obviously, the price of a gallon of gasoline or diesel, depending on what kind of vehicle you drive, is already up about $1. These are things that's already been baked in now. And then you have issues like, because we've used so many, I didn't even talk about this yet, so many of our offensive missiles, whether that's the Tomahawk cruise missiles, the JASSM, the SM-2, SM-3, several other categories, SM-6, I think, several categories of offensive missiles. We have gone through a ton of those things, and we have used up a huge amount of our interceptor missiles, that the PAC-3, the THAAD system, several other kinds as well. And even though we may have some more, and apparently we've been really busy over the last 8-10 days since the ceasefire started, of restocking everything and sending stuff throughout the region in case the president gives the order to restart this thing, they had to reload all of our ammunition, all of our weapon magazine stocks, all the places where we store these things up on ships and all this other kind of thing, so that if Iran goes back to its firing, if it goes with more drones, if it goes with more missiles, then we have the ability to at least attempt to intercept and shoot them down. So we've got to shoot even more of those. If President Trump gives the word and the ceasefire ends by whatever it means, then we've got to have plenty of offensive missiles so that we can go in with some kind of sustained rate of fire that's probably really high at the beginning, like it was.
Yep, we're going to rain down fire from the sky either this weekend or Monday. Because Iran isn't going to capitulate like the way Trump is pretending.
At the beginning of the war on February the 28th. All that cost a lot of money. And what that means is our national stockpiles keep dwindling. It keeps going down further and further and further.
Yep.
So
we're using all this against Iran. What happens if we're actually in a war against China, which controls our rare earth supply? I mean, then right now, rare earth supply to the United States are being limited, but they're still flowing. If we actually went to war, for example, with Iran, with China, they'd be cut off entirely. No rare earths at all. We wouldn't have any ability to restock our missiles. And after this, the way it's going, all our inventories of offensive weaponry will be critically low. And we've moved all these interceptors out of the Middle East, including the THAAD system from South Korea.
So what happens if we have an unexpected military contingency anywhere else in the world? Remember, we brag about how we have a global footprint and we have military bases all over the planet. Well, listen, friends, if the 700-800 bases, however many we actually have these days, that we
so not only is there a risk that China might be emboldened to try something with Taiwan during this window of extreme weakness for the United States, you have a situation in Europe which is deteriorating. I'm going to go into that. There'll be another video, but yeah, Europe is upping its provocation against Europe is upping its provocation against Russia seriously. That I'll get into that in a later video.
We have everywhere, the really high tech, the F-35s, the F-22s, F-18s, F-16s, 15s, all those great aircraft that we have, all the avionics that we go along with, these great ships we have, the Arleigh Burke class destroyers, aircraft carriers, all this stuff. It's fantastic, but it's all meaningless if you don't have missiles, and that's our Achilles heel. We don't have the defense industrial base capacity to extend those things out, to replace combat losses, to get into a sustained combat in this war.
I've said it, we're a legacy military, ever more so as our manufacturing base continues to shrink. We have all these aircraft carriers that were made decades ago, and all these stocks of weapons built up over years and years and years and years. And but we can't replace it quickly. We can't replace any of it quickly. And our ability to service it and maintenance it is reason, after we had was it 10,000 ships during World War II? Then it dropped to a more normal 1,000 U.S. warships for the 70s and 80s. Then it's dropped further and further, and now it's around 300 warships. We are a shadow of our former self. Still a very, very, very powerful shadow, but still a shadow.
One theater of operations. Now, what does that tell you? And what does that tell our adversaries if they start looking around and going, man, the longer this thing drags on, the bigger a problem that America's going to have to reply to anything else anywhere else. And I'm just telling you, I think we're in the red category to where if something did happen somewhere, God forbid, in Asia or in Europe somewhere. And
Europe, there's real risk. Like right now, the NATO deterrent is weaker than ever. Like, what if Russia seriously decide now it's time to punish like Estonia for shooting drones into Russian airspace and hitting Russian targets? I'll get into that later. If Russia invades Lithuania or Estonia, what does the United States do? We have everything deployed in the Middle East. Since the Red Sea is closed to us, to get if we want to bring our aircraft carriers to Europe, we have to go all around Africa. There's no way. And our other aircraft carriers are under maintenance. We have everything deployed here that we have available. There's very little we could do. What would you do if Russia invades Estonia? I think that it'd be very interesting. And I'm not saying risk is. I think the risk of that happening now is still on the lower side, but it's more than 10% maybe.
we had to go fight an unexpected war, we'd be screwed. I mean, I'm just going to call it what it is, straight up. Our national security capability has been severely degraded because of this foolish excursion, as the president calls it, this war of choice, this war that violates American law, violates morality. All of those things that has been costed so far. So why would we want to get into a situation to where the physical cost has already been astronomical when our security was never threatened up to this point? We should never have gone into those. All these Americans should still be alive. All these bases should still be fully operational. All these inventories should still be up here. And none of them are. We've lost all of that. And we need to start asking some hard questions. Why did we go down this path? Why are we spending all this money? And why are we not taking the off-ramp now? Now, I was emphatic in the spring of 2022 that at the Istanbul meetings between the United States and Russia and Ukraine, that there was a deal on the table. And it would have gotten the war off the table in a couple of months. And just think how many hundreds of thousands of people would still be alive today, and how much more territory in Ukraine would still belong to them, and how many more cities would still be fully operational, and no one would have ever had to leave, flee, the millions of people that have fled and go elsewhere in Europe. How many of that? How big of a cost to humanity, much less us and our allies, has that cost because of our foolish unwillingness to take a diplomatic deal on the table? We are in a similar situation right now.
U.S. and Europe we haven't recognized the reality of their military decline. We watched a video on state of UK Navy, for example. It's pathetic. Yet we're still United States and Europe still trying to act like they're great powers despite their decline. Because of cutting off Russian oil, Germany is losing its industrial base, for example, greatly weakened. Your industrial base, that's what sustains a military. You don't have one. You don't have a military long term. Yet we're still acting arrogance like we can defeat Russia and Ukraine and Iran, despite just not having the military to do so.
We have a deal on the table that can be done. It can be based on the Iranian 10-point plan, which is something that we would hate, just like that the Istanbul something was something the Ukrainians hated and didn't like. It would have taken a bitter pill, but that would have been profoundly better, orders of magnitude better. Had they taken that bitter pill then, it'd have been ancient history by now. That'd have been 4 years ago. 4 years ago. That would have been taken care of. Half these cities that were already damaged would have been rebuilt, and these other ones have never been torn down. That's the cost of letting go with a diplomatic off-ramp when you have it because it's unpleasant. Here today, we have an off-ramp too. President Trump would have to take a bitter pill. He would have to swallow and take a lot of heat domestically. There's no doubt about it. It would be a big problem, especially heading into the midterms. There's no question about it. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's an easy solution. It's a hard call, but it is desperately necessary, and this is where we need actual manly leadership. So you want to talk about President Trump being this great guy? Okay, here's your chance to prove it. We need leadership right now.
Yes, but the leadership you propose is Trump committing political suicide. And you have the added context that look at what they did to him during the 4 years he wasn't in power. Convicted him of all these felony charges for completely bullshit way, and tried to take away all his money in New York City through a bullshit lawsuit. Trump losing power is not just retire, just go on normal life. Democrats will come after him and try to destroy his entire life. So it's more. It's not like other presidents. It's you're a lame duck now. For Trump being a lame duck and losing political influence is close to a death sentence in terms of the effect on his life. So it's just one added pressure point that why he's pretending so much and refusing to recognize reality is the Democrats' insane attacking him over the years. And it's unlikely that he's going to do what Daniel Davis is suggesting, because it's a consequence not just for him but for his entire family would be so dire.
Now, like we had never needed it before in my lifetime. Maybe the last time was like 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis, when we needed some really strong, firm, life and death leadership, which we got from JFK, that prevented a nuclear war. President Trump has an opportunity right now with firm, decisive leadership and manning up and doing the hard thing and eating some crow where it needs to be, having some humility, but recognizing for the good of the nation, this is what we have to do. If we get this war off the table right now, then this can be an ugly chapter. There's already some problems baked in. There's a bunch of already talked about here. Regional allies is going to be a problem. The way he's treated our NATO allies even today, that's going to be a problem. That's something we're going to have to navigate. That's already. Iran, you heard Professor Marandi there, and there's no reason to think that this is not the same thinking of their government. They're in control of the Strait of Hormuz, and they will never give that up. They're going to open it up and have some kind of a
Agreed.
passage.
Now that they've established control over it, it cost them a supreme leader, their Pope, and because of that, they finally took control of Strait of Hormuz, and they're not giving that up.
Whether there's tolls, whether someday there's not tolls, that's to be determined. But it'll be opened up. But it will be with the understanding that they could close it back at any time. You can't put that genie back in the bottle, and there's no way militarily to prevent them from doing it. That's another baked-in cost. That's already. But if we go forward, if there is another big splash, if we return by our choice to the war, and we do try to hit Iran with the way that is, it's not just Professor Marandi you got to listen to. It's what the Iranian leadership has said. They will strike back tit for tat. They will hit our regional allies.
They've done an eye for an eye this entire conflict every time, and there's no reason to think they'd stop.
In ways they haven't so far, and they will hit our assets in ways that we haven't been hit so far. And Israel will again get hit in ways that it hasn't so far. And because we've used so many of our interceptor missiles, it's not likely we can go on. And Iran can probably say, "Hey, bring it on. We'll have this fight with you. It'll hurt us, but we can stretch this out. We can probably survive a half year like this." I don't think the United States can. No. I don't think that we can.
Trump is finished. I said 6 months. Strait of Hormuz closed. He's finished. That's all Iran needs to do to win.
Economically or militarily, because we don't have that much ammunition, and our defense industrial base can't produce it. No one in the West can. So we're at a critical juncture to where we're either going to suffer a strategic defeat, which is already baked in, along with all the harm that would go along that I just mentioned here, and the cost that's already been there. But if we reject this, I dare to even speculate what it could be. But it could be.
In other words, possible outcomes of this are bad for the United States, or terrible, or devastating. But there's no good outcome that's possible.
Found. It could be an economic depression, which would wreck everything that we have built in the last 250 years. That's how serious this is. That's why I'm so adamant that now may be our last best chance to avoid outright catastrophe. And I pray to God, President.
The sad part is that outright catastrophe is inevitable at some point with the dollar's collapse. And that's a completely set of for a completely different reason, just because of the amount of damage that will eventually do. This Iran crisis is going to accelerate the United States towards that eventual collapse of the dollar. It could, by the way, this is I think 5 years at least from now, collapse of the dollar. But that 5 years is starting to be pretty close.
Trump takes this opportunity. Thank you very much, folks. Appreciate you on a Friday afternoon. Again, if there's any breaking information, anything else happens even during the rest of this day, we'll bring it to you. Otherwise,
yep. Thank you for your coverage, Daniel Davis. And I think that'll do it for today. The takeaway from all this is no, the Strait of Hormuz is not open yet. It is unlikely to fully open anyway. There'll just be more posturing from Trump over the weekend, and expect a resumption of the hostilities. I'd actually even think maybe over the weekend. Not then Monday. Because no agreement is possible with the sides being this far apart. And Trump is moving too much military equipment into the region to expect any type of peace. Like and subscribe. Come watch our Kick on Kick or Twitch, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.